Saladin, the Sultan who rewrote the rules of war. When Saladin's army finally breached the walls of Jerusalem on October 2, 1187, the Christian defenders braced themselves for the inevitable massacre. History had taught them what to expect. 88 years earlier, when Christian crusaders had captured this same city, they had slaughtered every Muslim and Jew they could find, men, women, and children, until, as one chronicle recorded, horses waded through blood up to their knees in the Temple Mount. Now the tables had turned, and surely vengeance would be swift and terrible. But what happened next would shock both medieval and modern worlds alike. Instead of revenge, Saladin offered something no one expected: mercy. The unlikely beginning born Yusuf ibn Ayyub in 1137 in the fortress town of Tikrit, in modern-day Iraq. The boy who would become Saladin seemed destined for military obscurity, not legendary status. His family were Kurdish warriors serving the Seljuk Turks, and young Yusuf showed more interest in religious studies than warfare. In fact, he had to be practically dragged into his first military campaign by his uncle Shirkuh, who was leading an expedition to Egypt. Here's where history gets interesting. Saladin didn't want to go. He later admitted he felt as reluctant as if he were being driven to his death. Yet this unwilling warrior would become Islam's greatest military commander of the medieval period. The Egyptian Gambit. In the chaotic politics of 1160s Egypt, the dying Fatimid Caliphate had become a chess piece between rival Muslim powers and the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem. When Saladin's uncle Shirkuh became vizier of Egypt in 1169, the young Saladin served as his deputy. But when Shirkuh died mysteriously just 2 months later, possibly from eating too much rich food, after a military campaign, the 31-year-old Saladin found himself thrust into power. What happened next reveals Saladin's political genius. Within 2 years, he had abolished the Fatimid Caliphate, brought Egypt under the nominal control of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, and established himself as the unchallenged ruler. But he did this through such careful political maneuvering that he avoided the civil war that should have erupted. He paid off rivals, promoted loyalists, and presented himself not as a usurper, but as a reformer returning Egypt to Orthodox Sunni Islam. The vision that united an empire while Christian crusader states squabbled over territory and succession. Saladin conceived an audacious plan: unite the fractured Muslim world under a single banner for one purpose: the liberation of Jerusalem. But here's the catch. The very people he needed to unite were often more interested in fighting each other than fighting crusaders. Damascus, Aleppo, Mosul, Muslim power center viewed the others with suspicion. Saladin spent more than a decade in brutal campaigns not against Christians, but against fellow Muslims who refused to join his unified front. His enemies called him a power-hungry opportunist. His supporters called him a visionary. The truth? He was both. By 1186, Saladin had achieved what seemed impossible: a united Muslim coalition stretching from Egypt through Syria to northern Mesopotamia. The Crusader states, once protected by Muslim disunity, now faced an existential threat. The battle that changed everything, on July 4, 1187, near a barren plateau called the Horns of Hattin, Saladin laid a trap that would destroy Christian power in the Holy Land. The story of how it unfolded reads like a thriller. Reynold of Chatillon, a brutal crusader lord, had repeatedly violated truces, attacking Muslim caravans and even threatening to march on Mecca itself. When he captured a caravan that allegedly included Saladin's sister, accounts vary, Saladin swore a personal oath to execute him. Reynold's provocations gave Saladin the justification he needed for total war. Saladin invaded the kingdom of Jerusalem with 30,000 men and besieged the city of Tiberias. The Crusaders faced an agonizing choice: watch a city fall or march their army across waterless badlands in the scorching July heat. They chose to march. Saladin's forces harassed them every step of the way. When the exhausted, dehydrated Crusaders finally reached Hattin, they found themselves surrounded, their path to water blocked. As the Crusader armies slowly collapsed from thirst and exhaustion, Saladin's archers set fire to the dry grass, adding smoke and flames to their torments. The result was catastrophic. King Guy of Jerusalem was captured. The true cross, Christianity's most holy relic, was taken. Nearly every Crusader lord of importance was either killed or captured. In a single day, Saladin had effectively destroyed the military power of the Christian states. The oath fulfilled after the battle, Saladin hosted the captured King Guy and Reynold in his tent. He offered Guy water, a traditional gesture of mercy in Arab culture. But when Reynold reached for the cup, Saladin stopped him. Water offered by a captor meant protection. Reynold would receive no such mercy. Saladin personally beheaded Reynold, fulfilling his oath. Then he turned to the terrified King Guy and said, "A king does not kill a king." It was a moment that revealed Saladin's complex character, capable of both personal vengeance and political mercy. The Jerusalem miracle. 3 months after Hattin, Saladin's army surrounded Jerusalem. The city's garrison was depleted, its leaders captured. It should have been a bloodbath revenge for 1099. The Christian inhabitants certainly expected it. Instead, Saladin negotiated a surrender. For a ransom of 10 dinars per man, 5 per woman, and 1 per child, Christians could leave safely with their possessions. For those who couldn't pay, Saladin himself paid the ransom for thousands. He gave Christian refugees safe passage to Christian territories. When Orthodox Christians asked to remain in Jerusalem, he agreed. Even more remarkably, when Saladin's own commanders complained that he was being too generous, that the ransom terms were too low, that he was paying for too many refugees himself, he replied that generosity and victory would prove more valuable than gold. The enemy who became a legend. Here rests perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Saladin's story. His greatest fame came not from Muslim chroniclers, but from his Christian enemies. European sources, even while mourning the loss of Jerusalem, couldn't help but praise his honor, mercy, and chivalry. He became the model of knightly virtue in European literature, appearing in Dante's Divine Comedy and countless Crusader chronicles as the embodiment of the chivalric ideal. When King Richard the Lionheart arrived for the Third Crusade, the two leaders never met face to face, but they exchanged gifts and messages. Medieval writers invented elaborate stories of their mutual respect. Whether or not Richard actually sent word that he was ill and Saladin sent his personal physician, or that Saladin sent ice and fruit to cool the sick king, these stories reveal something important. Saladin had become, in his own lifetime, a legend transcending religious boundaries. The legacy of restraint. Saladin died in 1193, having given away so much of his wealth in charity that he left barely enough money to pay for his own funeral. His empire fragmented almost immediately among his squabbling heirs, the unified Muslim front he'd built crumbling with his death. Yet his legend only grew. Why? Because in an age of atrocity, Saladin practiced restraint. In an era of religious fanaticism, he demonstrated tolerance. When he could have matched Christian brutality with Muslim vengeance, he chose mercy. He understood something that many conquerors never learn, that how you win matters as much as whether you win. The Crusades would continue for another century after Saladin's death, growing increasingly bitter and brutal. But his example stood as proof that even in holy war, humanity need not be sacrificed. Muslim sources remember him as the liberator of Jerusalem. Christian sources remember him as the noble adversary. Both remember him as someone who proved that honor and conquest need not be contradictory. In our own age of religious conflict, Saladin's story offers a provocative question. If a medieval warrior fighting a holy war could prioritize mercy over vengeance, what does that say about modern conflicts? His greatest victory was in Hattin or Jerusalem. It was winning the respect of his enemies and the admiration of history. That's a conquest that has lasted far longer than any empire.